The joke of the galaxy. In the far corner of the galaxy, there was an empire feared by all. Planets trembled when its banners appeared in the sky. And at the heart of this empire sat the alien queen, a ruler of cold fire and endless pride. Her name was whispered like a curse, for she destroyed anyone who disobeyed her. But behind the walls of her shining palace, there was a secret. The queen had a daughter, a girl named Lyra. And Lyra was not the kind of child the empire had expected. She was weak, clumsy, and often sick. Her skin was pale, her steps shaky, and her hands trembled when she tried to hold a weapon. The soldiers laughed at her, the nobles mocked her. They called her names in the dark halls: broken princess, useless child, joke of the galaxy. The queen never showed kindness. When Lyra failed at training, the queen turned her face away. When Lyra cried, the queen only said, "A true heir does not cry." And when the empire laughed at Lyra, the queen stayed silent. To the galaxy, the alien queen's daughter was nothing more than a shameful shadow. But inside Lyra's heart, a storm lived. She wanted to be strong. She wanted to show the galaxy that she was more than a joke. Every night, she stood alone in her chambers. Staring at the stars, she whispered to herself, "There must be something more than this life of failure." One day, the empire captured a strange prisoner. The news spread across the palace like fire. It was a human, taken from a battle far away. Humans were considered weak, almost like insects compared to other species. The soldiers laughed at the idea that a human could fight, but this one had resisted capture until the very end. He had destroyed 3 war machines before being taken down, and now he was chained inside the queen's dungeon. Lyra was curious. She had never seen a human before. Her tutors told her that humans were simple creatures, fragile and soft. But when she walked past the dungeon doors, she heard a voice that stopped her. It was calm, strong, and unafraid. The human was speaking even in chains, his tone filled with fire. He said, "You can break my body, but you cannot break my will." Those words echoed inside Lyra's mind. No one in the empire spoke like that. Aliens obeyed because of fear. But this human spoke of something else, something she did not understand. Later that night, she could not sleep. She kept hearing his voice in her head. "Break my body, but not my will." The words felt dangerous but also powerful. She felt something stir inside her chest, a spark she had never felt before. The next day, the court gathered for a grand feast. The alien queen sat high upon her throne, her crown shining with cruel light. The generals bowed, the nobles praised her victories, and in the middle of it all sat Lyra, silent and invisible. The nobles whispered and snickered. "Look at the broken princess," they said. "She cannot even hold her cup properly." There, laughter cut deeper than knives, but Lyra did not cry. Instead, she thought of the human's voice. She thought of strength that did not come from fear. Suddenly, one noble raised his voice, mocking her openly. "A princess who cannot fight is no princess at all," he sneered. The hall erupted with laughter. The queen's cold eyes slid toward her daughter. But she said nothing. Lyra lowered her head, her hands trembling. She wanted to scream, to fight, to show them all that she was not broken. But the words died on her lips. In that moment, she felt like the smallest being in the galaxy. That night, she escaped from the feast and ran to the darkest halls of the palace. Her feet carried her down, until she stood before the dungeon again. The human sat inside the cell, his body bruised, his hands chained, but his eyes burned like 2 suns. When he saw her, he did not laugh like the nobles. He did not mock her like the soldiers. He only looked at her and said, "You don't belong here, do you?" Lyra froze. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She whispered, "I am the queen's daughter." The human tilted his head and smiled. "No," he said softly, "you are more than that." For the first time in her life, Lyra felt seen. Her heart raced, her breath caught in her chest. She did not know why, but she wanted to hear more. Something inside her whispered that this meeting was not an accident, that this human, this prisoner, would change everything, far above them. The alien queen slept in her golden chamber, unaware that in the shadows of her own dungeon, a spark had been lit. A spark that would grow into a fire strong enough to shake the empire itself. And so the story of the broken princess truly began. The human prisoner. The dungeon of the alien queen was a place of silence and shadows. No sound dared to rise here, except the dripping of water and the heavy steps of guards. It was a place where hope came to die, yet inside one of those dark cells sat the human. And his eyes were filled not with fear, but with fire. His name was Marcus, though the aliens only called him creature. They thought him small, weak, unworthy of respect. To them, humans were animals, barely above insects. But Marcus sat, straight even in chains, his back unbent, his spirit unbroken. Every scar on his skin told the story of battles he had survived, and every word from his lips carried the weight of something the Empire did not understand: freedom. Lyra stood before his cell once more, her pale fingers gripping the cold bars. She had told herself she would not return, but something inside her had dragged her down here. The memory of his voice refused to leave her mind. When she saw him again, her chest tightened. Though she did not know why. "You came back," Marcus said, his voice calm. His eyes studied her, not like the others who mocked or despised her. He looked at her as if she mattered, as if she were more than just a shadow in her mother's court. Lyra hesitated, then whispered, "I should not be here." A small smile touched Marcus's lips. "Then why are you?" Lyra did not know how to answer. She had never spoken to anyone who made her feel this way. With her people, every word was sharp like a blade, every look a judgment. But this human, even in chains, spoke to her as if they were equals. It unsettled her, and yet it also warmed her in a way she could not explain. "Humans are strange," Lyra murmured, almost to herself. "My mother says you are weak, fragile, and foolish." Marcus laughed softly, the sound echoing in the dungeon. "Maybe we are weak in body," he said, "but not in spirit." He leaned forward, his eyes burning. "We fight not because we are forced, but because we choose to." That word "choose" echoed in Lyra's mind like thunder. Choice was not something the Empire believed in. Obedience was law. The Queen commanded, and all obeyed. No one asked questions, no one disobeyed. But here was this human, speaking of something completely alien to her freedom of choice. "Choice," Lyra repeated under her breath. Marcus nodded. "A life without choice is not life at all." He tapped his chest with his chained hand. "Here, inside, that is where true power lives. Not in crowns, not in armies." Lyra shivered, though the dungeon was not cold. For the first time, she wondered, what if her whole life had been a cage? Not only the walls of the palace, not only her mother's cold eyes, but the rules themselves. The thought frightened her, yet it also excited her. It was like touching fire for the first time. Painful yet alive, the days passed and still Lyra returned at night when the halls grew quiet. She slipped away and crept down to the dungeon. She brought no food, no gifts, only questions. She wanted to know about humans, about their world, about the strange fire that burned in Marcus's words. He told her stories of Earth, of oceans stretching farther than the eye could see, of skies filled with birds free to fly wherever they wished, of people who argued, laughed, loved, and fought not because they had to, but because they chose to. Lyra listened with wide eyes, drinking in every word. Her heart ached with something she could not name, a longing for a world she had never seen. But whispers began to spread. The guards noticed the princess's footsteps in the dungeon. Nobles whispered of her strange behavior, and the queen's spies began to wonder why her daughter lingered in the darkness. The court was cruel, and it did not take long for rumors to grow. They said the broken princess had fallen under the spell of the human, that she was too weak to resist his tricks, that soon she would shame the Empire even more. One evening, Lyra stood in the court as the queen addressed her generals. The queen's voice was sharp as a blade. She spoke of war, of conquest, of burning another planet to ash, but then her eyes narrowed and turned to her daughter. "I hear you spend your nights in the dungeon," she said coldly. The hall grew silent, every noble staring at Lyra. Her throat tightened, her heart hammered. She could not speak. The queen's lips curled in disdain. "You waste your time with a creature," she spat. "Humans are nothing, remember that." Lyra lowered her head, but inside her chest, Marcus's words burned. "True power lives here," he had said, in her heart, not in her crown, not in her bloodline. For the first time, she felt the heavy chains of her empire pressing down, and for the first time, she wondered what would happen if she tried to break them. That night, she returned to the dungeon once more. Marcus saw the pain in her eyes and spoke softly. "You are stronger than you think," he said. Lyra shook her head, whispering, "I am broken. Everyone knows it." Marcus leaned closer, his voice firm. "No, princess, you are not broken. You are only asleep." His words struck her like lightning, and in that moment, something deep within her stirred. Her hands tingled. Her skin glowed faintly with light she had never seen before. She gasped and pulled back, hiding her hands. But Marcus only smiled, his eyes shining. "You see? You carry power inside you," he said. "The question is, will you let it die, or will you set it free?" Lyra's heart raced, fear and wonder twisting inside her. She had spent her whole life being told she was a joke, a failure, a shadow. But here in the dungeon, a chained human had given her something no one else ever had: belief. And belief was more dangerous than any weapon, far above. The queen dreamed of her empire's endless glory, unaware that in the silence of her dungeon, her broken daughter had taken her first step toward awakening, and that step would change the fate of the galaxy forever. A spark of rebellion, the palace of the alien queen stood like a mountain of metal and fire. Its halls were sharp with pride, its air heavy with fear. Every soldier walked like a blade, every noble spoke like poison. And in the middle of this world of cruelty, Lyra walked as a ghost, but she was no longer the same ghost she had been before. Since meeting the human prisoner, her nights were filled with restless fire. Marcus's words lived inside her. "True power lives in your heart," he had said. "Freedom is stronger than fear." Lyra repeated those words in silence, whispering them like a secret prayer. Day after day, she hid her visits to the dungeon. When the guards looked away, when the halls grew empty, she slipped down into the shadows. Marcus was always waiting, even in chains. He seemed more free than anyone in the palace, and Lyra hung on to every story he told. Stories of rebellion, of courage, of ordinary humans who rose against kings and tyrants. Each word struck her harder than any blade her mother's soldiers had ever swung at her. "You are not broken," Marcus told her again and again. "You are only asleep." And slowly, Lyra began to believe him. One night, as she left the dungeon, she paused in a dark corner of the hall. She lifted her trembling hands, remembering the strange glow that had burst from her skin before. Her heart pounded. She whispered to herself, "Wake up." For a moment, the air around her shifted, like it was listening. A faint spark of light danced across her fingertips, then vanished. Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream. From both fear and joy, something inside her was awakening, but the palace was not blind. The nobles saw the way her eyes shone brighter. The soldiers noticed her footsteps carried more weight, and soon the whispers returned. "The broken princess plays in shadows," they sneered. "She dreams of being more than she is." Their words crawled through the halls like snakes waiting to strike. The chance came during a gathering in the great court. The queen's throne blazed at the far end. Nobles lined the hall, draped in their pride. Generals boasted of victories, listing planets conquered and cities burned. And Lyra sat in silence, her hands folded in her lap. She wanted only to vanish. But fate had other plans. A noble prince from one of the empire's strongest houses stepped forward. His name was Kale. Cruel in both face and heart, he bowed before The queen, his voice loud with false praise. Then his eyes slid to Lyra, cold and mocking. "Your Majesty," he said. "It is a shame your daughter cannot match your greatness." The hall chuckled, nobles covering their mouths. Kale smirked. Perhaps the humans she visits in the dungeon are better company for her. The hall froze. Lyra's breath shattered. Inside her chest, her secret was exposed. The queen's gaze turned sharp as a blade. Every eye burned into Lyra's skin. Kale stepped closer, enjoying her silence. "Tell us, broken princess, do you hope the human will make you strong? Or are you just as weak as he is?" The laughter that followed was cruel and endless. But in that moment, Lyra's heart did not break. It burned. The spark Marcus had lit inside her roared to life. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with rage. She rose from her seat, her eyes blazing with something no one had ever seen in her. The laughter choked into silence. The air around her shimmered. A glow erupted from her skin, faint but powerful. The floor beneath her feet quivered. Cups rattled. The torches on the walls flickered. Gasps filled the hall. Kale stumbled back, his smirk gone, his eyes wide with shock. Lyra's voice cut through the silence, stronger than she had ever spoken. "I am not broken," she said. The glow pulsed brighter. "I am not your joke." Her words struck like thunder, echoing through the court. For a heartbeat, she stood tall, the spark alive. For a heartbeat, the broken princess became something more. But then fear crashed down on her. She gasped, forcing the glow to fade. Her trembling hands dropped to her sides. The hall buzzed with whispers, fear and awe mixing in their voices. The queen's cold eyes narrowed, her lips curled in disdain, though her gaze lingered longer than before. "Enough," she commanded. Her voice silenced the hall instantly. The nobles bowed their heads, though their eyes darted back to Lyra with new suspicion. The queen's words cut sharp. "A mistake of blood," she said. "She is nothing." Lyra lowered her head, hiding her shaking hands, but inside her, the spark still burned. For the first time in her life, she had defied them, and for the first time, they had looked at her not with laughter, but with fear that night. She returned to the dungeon, her heart still racing, her mind torn between shame and triumph. Marcus watched her enter, his eyes knowing. They saw it, didn't they? He asked. Lyra swallowed hard, nodding. "I could not stop it," she whispered. Marcus smiled. "Good," he said. "Do not stop it again." Lyra stared at him, fear twisting inside her. "They will kill me if I show more," she said. Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady as stone. "No, princess, they will fear you." He tapped his chest again. "The spark you feel inside, that is your freedom. Do not let them take it from you." Lyra sat in silence, her hands glowing faintly in the shadows. She had lived her whole life as a ghost, a joke, a broken thing. But now something inside her was alive, something wild, something dangerous. And deep down, she knew it was only the beginning. Far above them, the palace walls trembled in silence. The empire had laughed at the broken princess for years, but laughter was turning into whispers, and whispers would soon become fear. The spark of rebellion had been lit, and once lit, no empire could ever fully extinguish it. Asterisk, the broken daughter's secret. The palace had always been a place of cold stone and cruel eyes. But after the court saw the glow of Lyra's hidden power, the air grew heavier. The laughter that once followed her now carried a sharp edge. No one dared mock her openly, but their whispers filled the halls like poison. "The broken princess hides something," they murmured. "She is not as weak as she pretends." Lyra walked through the corridors with her head lowered. But inside her, the spark burned brighter than ever. It frightened her, but it also gave her strength. For the first time, when she looked into the eyes of the nobles, she did not see only hate, she saw fear. Her mother, the alien queen, remained silent, but her silence was not ignorance. Her eyes followed Lyra longer than before, colder, sharper, searching for cracks. The queen was a predator, and predators always watched when prey began to resist. Lyra knew she was in danger, but she could not stop what was growing inside her. At night, in her chamber, she sat by the window staring at the stars. She raised her hands, trembling, whispering the words Marcus had given her. "Wake up." Each night the glow returned stronger. Sometimes it danced like fire across her skin. Other times it filled the room with a pulse of light that made her heart race. She hid it from the world, but she could not hide it from herself still. She returned to the dungeon. Marcus listened to her with quiet pride. "You are changing," he said, his voice calm. "You feel it, don't you?" Lyra nodded, though her eyes were uncertain. "It frightens me," she whispered. Marcus shook his head. "Fear means you are alive," he said. "Fear means you are standing on the edge of something greater." But the palace grew restless. One night, during a feast filled with music and wine, Cale, the arrogant prince who had mocked her before, rose once more. His voice rang across the hall, sharp and cruel. "Your Majesty," he said to the queen, "it is dangerous to keep secrets in your court." The nobles leaned forward, hungry for drama. Cale's eyes glittered as they turned to Lyra. "The broken princess hides something from us," he sneered. "Perhaps she is not broken. Perhaps she is cursed." Gasps filled the room. Lyra's chest tightened. Her hands clenched under the chufa table. She felt the spark inside her roar in anger, begging to escape. Cale smirked, stepping closer. He slammed his cup onto the floor, the sound echoing like thunder. "If the princess holds power, let her prove it," he shouted. "Or let her admit she is still the shame of this empire." The court roared with laughter, but this time, Lyra did not shrink away. Her body trembled, her breath quickened. The spark inside her refused to stay hidden. Her eyes glowed faintly as she rose from her seat. The hall fell silent at the sight of her. Cale sneered, ready to mock again. But before he could speak, the floor beneath him shook. A surge of energy burst from Lyra's hands. Slamming into the ground between them, the stone cracked, the torches flared. Gasps and screams filled the chamber as the nobles stumbled back. Cale froze, his mocking grin gone, his eyes wide with fear. Lyra's voice rang out, louder than ever. "Before, I am not broken," she cried, her words filled with power. "I am not your curse, and I am not your shame." The hall shook with the echo of her voice for a moment. Every noble saw her not as the broken princess, but as something far more dangerous then. Just as quickly the glow faded. Lyra fell back into her seat, her chest heaving, her hands shaking. The court buzzed with fear and awe, whispers swirling like a storm. "She has power," they murmured. "Real power." The queen's eyes narrowed, her expression unreadable. She raised her hand, and silence fell across the hall. Her voice was calm, but sharp as a blade. "This is nothing but an accident," she declared. "My daughter is a mistake of blood and nothing more." The nobles bowed their heads, but fear lingered in their eyes for the first time. They did not see Lyra as a weak joke. They saw her as a secret, a dangerous secret. That night, Lyra stood at her mirror, staring at her trembling reflection. Tears blurred her vision, but her heart pounded with pride. She had shown them, even if only for a moment. She was not broken, but she also knew the danger had doubled. Her mother's silence was not safety, it was a warning when she went to the dungeon again. Marcus listened carefully to her story. He leaned closer, his eyes burning with certainty. "They fear you now," he said. "That is the beginning." Lyra shook her head. "They will kill me," she whispered. Marcus's voice grew firm. "No," he said, "they will try. But fear is a weapon too, and now it is yours." Lyra lowered her gaze, but inside her chest, the spark burned brighter than ever. It frightened her, but it also gave her strength. She was no longer just the broken princess. She was something more, something dangerous. And though she did not yet understand the full shape of her power, she knew this. The secret was no longer hers alone. The court had seen it. Her mother had seen it. The galaxy itself would soon see it, above the palace. The stars glimmered cold and distant, But in the heart of the empire, a fire had been lit. And no silence, no throne, no crown could keep it hidden forever. The broken daughter's secret was out, and the empire would never look at her the same way again. Asterisk chains and choices. The alien queen's empire was built on fear. Fear kept the nobles silent. Fear kept the soldiers loyal. Fear kept the people in chains. But now, something small yet dangerous had slipped through her control. A human, one fragile creature, had lit a spark in the heart of her weakest child. And that spark was growing. The queen watched from her golden throne with cold patience. Her spies whispered of her daughter's late-night visits, of the strange glow seen in her chambers. Her generals warned that the nobles whispered too much about the broken princes. But the queen did not act with haste. She was a predator, and predators waited for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came one morning. When the court gathered in the grand hall, the queen's voice was smooth, but her words cut deep. "Bring the human," she commanded. Gasps filled the chamber as Marcus was dragged into the hall. His wrists bound, his steps heavy but steady. His head was bloodied, but his eyes still burned with fire. Lyra's breath caught in her chest as she watched, her heart pounding with dread. The queen rose, her crown gleaming in the cold light. "This creature has poisoned my court with lies," she declared. "He dares speak of freedom, of rebellion, of choice." The nobles murmured, their fear growing with each word. And worst of all, the queen's gaze turned to Lyra, sharp as a knife. "He has corrupted my daughter." Lyra's blood ran cold. Every noble turned toward her, their whispers slicing like blades. She wanted to speak, but her throat locked. Her hands trembled beneath the table, the spark inside her begging to rise. But if she revealed herself again, if she showed her power here, she knew it would be her end. The queen's voice thundered across the hall. "This human will be executed at dawn," she said. "He will serve as an example, a warning, and his fire will be extinguished forever." Words struck Lyra harder than any blade. Her chest ached, her breath came fast. She wanted to scream, but she forced herself to stay silent. The nobles cheered, hungry for blood. Cale smirked, his eyes locked on her, knowing she would break. That night, Lyra lay in her chamber, her heart racing. Her thoughts were a storm. Marcus's voice, her mother's command, the glow in her hands. If she stayed silent, Marcus would die. If she acted, she would betray her mother and the empire itself. She stared at her trembling reflection in the mirror, tears streaming down her face. "Chains or choice," she whispered. "Chains or choice." Her answer came when she saw the stars. The same stars Marcus had spoken of, worlds where people lived free, where power was not fear but hope. Her tears dried, her trembling stilled. She stood, her decision burning like fire inside her. When the palace slept, Lyra moved like a shadow. Through the halls, her cloak wrapped tight, her steps silent. The guards were everywhere, but the palace was her prison. She knew its paths, its secrets. Every heartbeat carried her closer to the dungeon, closer to her choice. Marcus sat in chains, his body weak, but his eyes still alive. When he saw her slip into the cell, his lips curved in a faint smile. "You came," he whispered. Lyra's voice shook. "They mean to kill you at dawn." Marcus nodded calmly, as if he had expected it. "Then dawn will be my freedom," he said. Lyra shook her head fiercely. "No, I will not let them take you." Her trembling hands reached for the chains. At first, they did not move, heavy and unyielding. But then the spark inside her roared awake. Her skin glowed, her breath grew hot. And with a cry, the chains shattered like glass. Marcus stared at her, awe flickering in his eyes. "I told you," he whispered. "You are stronger than you know." Lyra shook her head, tears spilling. "I am terrified," she admitted. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and strong. "Courage is not the absence of fear," he said. "It is the choice to act anyway." His words steadied her. She pulled him to his feet, and together they moved through the shadows of the dungeon. The alarm had not yet sounded, but danger pressed in from every side. At every turn, Lyra felt her power flicker stronger. The sparks from her hands lit the path, blasting doors open, shaking walls. Her fear fueled her strength, and her strength carried them forward. But the escape could not remain hidden forever. A shout rang out. The clash of steel followed. Guards swarmed like a tide, their blades gleaming in the dark. Lyra's heart pounded, her body shook, but Marcus stood firm at her side. Together, they fought, he with his fists and fire, she with the strange glow that poured from her hands. The dungeon blazed with light as her power burst forth, throwing guards aside, cracking stone. For the first time, she felt alive, not broken, not weak, but alive. When the last guard fell, Marcus looked at her with fierce pride. "You see?" he said. "You are no prisoner, you are a flame." Lyra's chest heaved, her hands still glowing. She had saved him, she had chosen, and in that choice, her power had awakened stronger than ever. But she knew this was only the beginning. Her mother would learn of her betrayal. The court would turn against her. The Empire itself would hunt her down. But as she stood in the broken dungeon, Marcus at her side, she felt no regret. For the first time in her life, she had made her own choice, and that choice had given her strength. Far above, the palace walls shook with the echo of her rebellion. The alien queen dreamed of her eternal throne, unaware that her daughter had taken her first true step away from chains and toward destiny. The broken princess was no longer only a secret. She was now a traitor, a rebel, a flame, and flames could spread. The rise of the broken daughter. The palace no longer felt like stone and steel. It felt like a cage closing in. Alarms had spread through the empire. The queen's guards filled every corridor, and the nobles whispered like frightened birds. Name of the broken princess was no longer spoken with laughter, it was spoken with fear. Lyra and Marcus hid in the abandoned chambers deep below the throne hall. The flicker of her power glowed faintly in the darkness, painting her face with light. Her hands shook, her heart pounded, but her eyes burned with fire she had never felt before. Marcus watched her closely, his voice steady. "You have stepped onto a path you cannot leave now," he said. "You have chosen, and choices have consequences." Lyra closed her eyes, her chest tight. "I betrayed my mother," she whispered. "I betrayed the Empire." Marcus shook his head, his voice calm but firm. "No, Lyra, you betrayed chains. You betrayed fear, and you chose freedom." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But freedom has a price, and now your mother will make you pay it." And the queen was already moving. From her golden throne she had heard of her daughter's rebellion, of broken chains, of shattered guards, of light spilling through the dungeon walls. Her rage was silent, but it burned hotter than fire. The nobles trembled before her, but she spoke only one command: "Bring her to me." The palace trembled. With the storm of soldiers, Lyra knew hiding would not last. She stood tall, her cloak falling away, her glowing hands clenching into fists. "I cannot run forever," she whispered. Marcus nodded, his eyes steady on hers. "Then don't run," he said. "Face her." The throne hall was filled with shadows when Lyra entered. The nobles pressed against the walls, their eyes wide. The guards lined the room, their spears gleaming, and at the far end sat the queen, her crown sharp as blades, her gaze cold as ice. Her voice cut across the silence. "My broken daughter," she said, each word heavy with scorn. "You dare betray your blood, your crown, your empire." Lyra's body trembled, but she did not bow. Her voice, though soft, carried through the hall. "I am not broken," she said. Her hands glowed, light flickering in the air. "I am not your shame." The queen rose slowly, her cloak sweeping the ground. For the first time, she looked at her daughter not as a shadow, but as a threat. "You think this spark makes you powerful?" she hissed. "You are nothing, Lyra, nothing but a mistake." Her voice shook the hall, her power radiating like a storm. But Lyra stood firm, her chest rising and falling with every breath. Marcus's voice echoed in her memory. "Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the choice to act anyway." She lifted her hands, the glow blazing brighter. "I am not your mistake," she cried, her voice shaking the walls. "I am your end." The hall erupted in chaos. The queen's power struck like a wave, shattering stone, ripping banners from the walls. Lyra's light flared in answer, clashing. With her mother's storm, the nobles screamed, fleeing to the corners. The guards froze in terror. For the first time, the queen's throne room became a battlefield. Lyra staggered under the weight of her mother's strength. The queen was vast, her power heavy as the galaxy itself. But every time Lyra thought she would fall, she remembered Marcus's words. She remembered the laughter of the nobles, the chains of the dungeon, the stars in the sky, and the spark inside. Her roared into a flame. The light burst from her hands, flooding the hall. The queen snarled, pushing harder, her voice thunderous. "You are nothing." Lyra's voice rose above hers, trembling but unstoppable. "I am free." The clash shook the palace to its roots. Windows shattered. Pillars cracked. The very air screamed. Lyra felt her body breaking, but her spirit soared. She was no longer the broken princess. She was power. She was choice. She was flame. The queen staggered back, her eyes wide with fury and disbelief. For the first time in her reign, she felt fear. Her daughter, her weak, broken, shamed daughter stood before her with power greater than her own. The nobles whispered, their voices trembling. "She is stronger than the queen. She is no longer broken." Marcus stood at the edge of the hall, his eyes blazing with pride. He had seen humans fight impossible battles, but never had he seen anything like this. A princess who had been called weak, mocked, cursed, now stood as a force that shook. The empire itself. Lyra raised her hands once more, her voice steady and sharp. "No more chains," she cried. "No more fear." The light burst outward, slamming into her mother with the force of stars. The queen screamed as her throne cracked beneath her. The empire itself seemed to tremble. Silence fell, heavy and endless. The queen knelt in the ruins of her throne, her crown shattered, her cloak torn. Her eyes burned with hate, but behind the hate was something worse, fear. The nobles fell to their knees trembling. The guards lowered their weapons, their faces pale, and Lyra stood tall, glowing like a star at the center of the broken hall. For the first time the galaxy had seen the truth. The broken princess was no joke. She was the flame that could burn an empire. Lyra's chest heaved, her power flickering but alive. She looked at her mother, broken yet unbowed. "I am not your failure," she whispered. "I am not your shadow. I am free." And with those words, the broken daughter rose, no longer hidden, no longer afraid. Her rebellion had become her crown, and the galaxy would never be the same. The human's gift. The throne hall lay in ruins. The banners of the empire hung in tatters. The once golden throne cracked and broken. Smoke and silence filled the air where laughter and cruelty had once ruled. And at the center of it all stood Lyra, her skin still glowing faintly, her chest rising and falling with every heavy breath. The nobles trembled, their jeweled robes stained with dust. The guards knelt in silence, their weapons forgotten. All eyes were fixed on the daughter they had once called broken, useless, a joke. But there was no laughter now, only fear. And something deeper, something like hope. The alien queen knelt in the ruins of her shattered throne, her crown cracked, her pride torn away. Her cold eyes still burned, but the fire was weaker. For the first time, the queen had been struck not by a rival empire, not by an enemy general, but by her own daughter. And it was not power born of cruelty, not power born of fear. It was power born of choice. Lyra looked at her mother, and her voice was steady. "No more chains," she said, her glow flickering through the hall. "No more fear," the nobles whispered, their voices soft as wind. "She has defeated the queen. She is not broken. She is the true heir." But Lyra shook her head, her eyes shining. "I am not heir to fear," she said. "I am heir to freedom." Her words fell over the hall like fire. For a moment, No one moved. No one dared breathe. And then slowly, the guards lowered their heads. The nobles sank to their knees, not in mockery this time, not in ridicule, but in surrender. The broken princes had become something they had never expected. Their leader, Marcus, stepped forward, his chains gone, his eyes alive with pride. He looked at Lyra not as a queen, not as a conqueror, but as someone who had chosen her own path. "You have done what no one believed you could," he said softly. Lyra turned to him, her chest tight with emotion. "I was never strong alone," she whispered. "It was you gave me the words. The fire, the courage." Marcus shook his head, his smile faint. "No, Lyra. The fire was always yours," he said. "All I did was remind you to set it free." The nobles heard their exchange, their confusion growing. How could a human, a creature they had mocked as weak, stand beside the one who now held the galaxy's attention? But in their hearts, they knew power was not always in bloodlines, not always in crowns. Sometimes it was in belief, in courage, in a single spark shared between two souls. The queen's voice rose once more, weak but filled with venom. "You think you can rule without fear?" She spat. "You think freedom will keep the empire together? It will tear itself apart." Lyra stepped closer, her glow burning brighter. "Then let it tear apart," she said. "If chains are the only thing holding it, then it does not deserve to stand." The queen recoiled at her words, her silence louder than any scream. For the first time in her reign, she had no answer. Her empire of fear had cracked, and her daughter had lit the fire that would consume it. Lyra turned to the hall, her voice rising. "This empire was built on chains," she said, "but today we break them." Her glow spread across the floor, the walls, the ceiling, filling the ruins with light. The nobles shielded their eyes, the guards dropped their spears. And in that light, something shifted, not obedience born of terror, but the first spark of belief. The broken princess was no longer broken. She was the flame of freedom, and her people could feel it. When the light faded, Marcus stepped beside her. The silence between them was heavy but full. Lyra's eyes softened as she looked at him. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Marcus's eyes turned to the shattered throne, then back to her. "Now," he said, "you build something new." She frowned, her voice small. "I don't know how." Marcus smiled, his voice gentle. "No. One does at the start," he said. "But that is what makes it real. That is what makes it free." For a moment, Lyra felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her. The nobles, the guards, the whispers of distant stars. But then she remembered the nights in the dungeon, the stories of Earth, the words of choice, the promise of freedom, and she knew this was not the end of her story, it was the beginning. She raised her glowing hands once more, her voice steady. "This empire will no longer belong to fear," she declared. "It will belong to choice." The nobles bowed their heads. The guards struck the floor with their fists, not because they were forced, but because, for the first time, they believed the alien queen, broken and silent, could only watch as her daughter took the throne not with chains, but with light. Her reign had ended. The reign of the broken princess had begun. But Lyra knew it was not her reign alone. She turned to Marcus, her eyes fierce yet gentle. "This is not my victory," she said. "This is ours." Marcus nodded, his smile quiet but full of pride. "The galaxy will remember," he said. "Not the queen, not the throne, but the day a broken daughter chose to rise." Lyra's eyes lifted to the stars, her voice soft. "And they will also remember the human who gave her the gift of freedom." The hall grew quiet, the ruins bathed in light. The future was uncertain, full of storms and trials. But for the first time, it was also full of hope. The broken daughter had risen. The human had given her the spark, and together they had lit a fire that would burn across the galaxy. No chains could stop it, no fear could smother it. The flame of freedom had been born, and it would never die.